All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals for Tuesday, November 17th. Just before we start, I just want to ask if anybody is here, fine, welcome. But if everybody could mute themselves until it's their turn to speak, please. That would be greatly appreciated. Even like I said, I know we're not on as often as we'd like to be, but regardless, the slightest noise picks up and it's a distraction. So if everybody could mute until it's their turn, that would be fantastic. I appreciate it. And we'll open with 488 Manhattan Street. I take it Mr. Jacobs and Ms. Drummy are here. Okay.
They are.
You guys can unmute. You guys can unmute yourself. Dave, you represent them as well?
I'm representing the applicants on the first case, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to see you. All right, so notice is hereby given that the Board of Appeal Town of Norwood will hold a public hearing November 17th, request of Joseph Jacobs and Teresa Drummy, case number 20-16, with respect to property located at 488 Manhattan Street in the single residence district. The meeting conducted in a go-to meeting that hopefully everybody seemed to sign on pretty easily with, so congratulations. This application requests a special permit under sections 5.4 and 5.4.4 of the zoning bylaws to allow alteration of an existing single-family dwelling that does not conform to side yard setback requirements and is situated on a lot having less area, frontage, and a lot width than required in the single residence district, to permit the construction of an addition to said dwelling, together with such other or further relief as the ZBA may deem appropriate in the circumstances. The application also requests a variance under the general laws to allow the construction of an addition to an existing non-conforming as to side yard setback single-family dwelling located on a non-conforming lot as to area, frontage, and lot width. Lot also pursuant to section 4.0 of the zoning bylaws. So welcome, everybody. I do have the affidavits in regards to this case and the newspaper clippings somewhere. But I do have them and I can attest to that. One second, I'll just read it. I do have the two dates. I have them here somewhere. I don't have them off the top of my head. Ramon, I don't know if you know them off the top of your head, but I do have the affidavits in the application.
We have the dates of October 29th, 2020 and November 5th, 2020.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's right in front of my face. Right. Phil, can you do me a favor? Phil? I can't hear me. Phil, can you mute your screen for a quick second? Phil Riley. All right, Dave, give it a shot. We'll see how everything goes. If everybody can hear me, go ahead. The floor is yours, Dave.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Board of Appeal. My name is David Hearn. I'm an attorney here in Norwood, and my office at 470 Washington Street. I'm here this evening representing Joseph Jacobs Jr. and Teresa Drummy, who have applied to the Zoning Board for relief with respect to their home at 488 Manhattan Street. This is a request for special permit. As you read in the notice, we've also, out of an abundance of caution, put in a request for a variance, although I believe this case squarely falls in the category of one where a special permit will be appropriate for the relief needed. What my clients are proposing to do is to add on to their home, which is a fairly typical Cape style house. And they want to build off the back to provide more room for themselves, including a new bedroom, a kitchen. The addition will have a basement. It'll fit very nicely off the back of the house, slightly jogged to one side, so it isn't a continuous straight wall from front of the existing house to the back of the addition. The reason they need relief is because the house is on a lot that it has less area than required. It's in the single residence zone, but it has less than 10,000 square feet, has 8,158 square feet. The frontage is 65.78 feet, which is deficient in terms of the normal 90 feet for both frontage and lot width. On the left-hand side of the property, as you look from the street, the boundary line does angle out a little bit, so the lot gets a little bit wider as you go back, so that it's 82.54 feet at the very back, but still not enough, and it doesn't satisfy the frontage or width requirements. The existing house on the left-hand side is also too close to the sideline. And so the house is non-conforming, the lot is non-conforming. The house was built about 1955, and it's fairly typical for that era, as is the size of the lot and the layout on the lot. But because the house and lot are non-conforming, we're required to come before you for any addition that exceeds 25% of an increase in habitable area. And that's what we're doing. Now, the addition that is proposed is shown on the plans that were filed with the application. We filed the existing conditions and the proposed conditions. And the proposed addition will conform to the setback and other dimensional requirements completely. It's the existing house that gives rise to the case. But this is a proposal that won't violate any concerns about appropriate use for the neighborhood. It's not going to create any environmental issues or traffic issues. Certainly not going to create any problems with utilities. All of these, of course, are concerns you have to think about when you're dealing with a request for special permit, particularly on a residential case where you've got to make a determination that the proposed use will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing use or the existing conditions. The addition will be an attractive addition. It won't be that visible from the street for the most part, but it will be somewhat visible and will be built in a very attractive manner. They expect, and probably the town counts on the fact that they'll be adding value to the property, which will add tax revenue for the town, benefiting the town. And they have discussed this with some of their neighbors and have heard no opposition from anybody. So hopefully everybody sees it as an improvement to a house in a neighborhood where people take great care of their homes for the most part. I'm going to defer on the variance aspect of it, because I really think this is a special permit case, but I'm happy to take any questions. And my clients are here and they're available to take questions also, Mr. Chairman. So that's really it, in addition to a non-conforming house and a non-conforming lot, but the addition itself will conform in all respects to the zoning requirements. Thank you.
All right, Dave, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll start down with Mr. Mulvihill, if we could, please. Any questions in regards to this?
I had my mic was mute. No, I know the property very well. Know Joe and Teresa very well. Know what they're trying to do. I know the Garrity's next door. I grew up with Johnny Garrity next door and spent many a day over there. And but for the fact that they don't have the side yard on the initial home, it shouldn't be a problem. But one more time, David, it's a one-story addition or is it a two-story addition?
It's really a one-story addition with basement. So thank you, Mr. Mulvihill.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck, Drum. Good luck, Joe.
All right, thanks. Mr. Riley, any questions, please?
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perry?
He's out. Mary Anderson's in, Tom.
I'm sorry, I knew that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, and I'm good with it too. I'm pretty straightforward. Is there any questions, Ramonda? You can take that down when you can, please. Is there anybody here for this particular, Mr. Katie, do you have a question on this, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your time tonight. I'm here with my in-laws. They're at 480 Manhattan Street. They just had a little bit of concern. They're the direct abutters. You know, in the past, particularly when they did some of the apartments here, there was a little concern with ledge. And this house that they're in was built in, I think, 1880s when my mother-in-law was just a kid. And they're just concerned if there's any blasting with the ledge, that maybe your contractor could just do a walkthrough beforehand and take a look-see. So we
Mr.
can.
Hearn, you want to address that?
So you're recorded.
Dave, you can address that if you'd like to.
Yeah, Barry, that was helpful, and I hope you have a good holiday by yourself, because it won't be with the in-laws probably. But my clients are aware that there's ledge in the neighborhood, but any ledge is not that may be there is not going to affect or be affected by what they're proposing here. So fortunately, this won't be a case where you've got blasting or anything like that that would be a real disturbance to anybody in the neighborhood.
You mean there would be no hammering or blasting of ledge at all?
Nope, don't expect it's going to have to be done.
Say again?
No, he said.
They don't,
They
they
do not
don't,
expect it will have to
You
be
don't
done.
expect it. Okay, my concerns are if it is, I know I've been in their house before they purchased it. And there is ledge down in the cellar, all right? Now, not much, I know, it's at the back door. It's not,
Mr.
you have
Chairman,
no,
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? I don't want to interrupt the gentleman. I didn't catch his name, but I don't want to interrupt it. But
Albert.
the answer is, there is some ledge in the basement, but not where they're going to do this work, and they're not going to do anything in the basement of the existing house that would affect the ledge.
my main concern is that ledge. Okay, because my garage is my garage is close by, and it's not a
It's a stone field found.
it's a fieldstone foundation, okay, that is cemented, and any movement on that would, I don't want it to affect the garage, that's all.
Mr. Katie, I'm gonna interrupt for a minute. I think the question's been asked and answered. I'm good with it, as long as you guys are good with it. You said there's no blasting taking place.
Okay,
Okay? Mr. Katie, could you do me a favor? Can you just identify that gentleman just for the record, please?
So it's Alan Tosca. He's the director butter next door.
and it's Albert V. And Vincent, not Y, which, you know, no big
Mr. Katie?
no big
So-
deal.
So they, like I said, they were just a little concerned with the blasting. If there's gonna be no blasting, I don't feel there's an issue. You know, I think it's all in all, good fit for the neighborhood. I would ask that maybe, you know, my son going up to the high school, maybe get an extra bump on his English grade coming forward, but that'd be great.
All right, there we go. All right. Well,
Yeah, you can come over to my house for dinner, buddy.
I didn't hear the question, Mr. Katie, and I'm going to shut it off right away, but thank you. Nice to see you, Barry.
Thank you, Counselor.
All right, any other further questions from the audience?
When is the construction gonna start? Or when is it expected to start?
We expect, Mr. Chairman, if this is approved, that it would be in the springtime.
Okay, all right. So that'll be good. And if there is any problem with the ledge, okay, like somebody to walk through the house and I could show them if there is a problem in my cellar or with the garage, okay? Is there something we can do for that? That's all. You can see that's my main concern.
Mr. Chairman, if
I'm
there were
listening.
blasting, it's a requirement that there be pre-blasting surveys done of any potentially affected properties. We're saying again that there isn't going to be any of that, but I understand Mr.
Okay,
Antosca's concern, and if we got to that, we'd have to do what the law requires. And if they committed some act that resulted in damage to a neighbor's property, then they may very well be responsible. But we don't expect that this is going to be a problem or an issue or part of the construction on this project
That-
anyway.
that was my main issue. In fact, probably my only issue, really.
All right, can we just, let's move forward, but let's agree to keep Mr. Costa, abreast of the situation if anything's gonna change, please. Okay. Appreciate it. Any further questions from anybody else? Okay, do I have a pleasure of the board?
Motion to close.
Second.
All right, motion to close by Mr. Mulvihill, second by Mr. Murphy. All those in favor, I'll do a roll call. Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Mulvihill,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
and Mr. Riley.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay, moving forward, do I have another? Excuse me. Do I have another pleasure of the board in regards to the permit?
Mr. Chairman, on the motion, actually on the application, please, one point of clarification if I could. David, and to Joe and Teresa, if there is ledge up there and it's obviously not blastable, it's probably a pneumatic hammer on the end of a front end loader that would probably be able to rip it apart. When we did the house up on Walters Road, we went over next door because there was the same concern with one of the neighbors. We took a look before, almost in the similar vein of the blasting issue that the blasting etiquette goes, or protocol. They come in, they take pictures and so forth and so on. Joe, if you do have to pneumatic it and you've got to get in there, if you could just go over to Mr. Antosca's, take a look at it and say, hey, listen, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Let's see it before we do it. And then we'll take a look afterwards. I don't think there's going to be an issue, but just to be a good neighbor, you know what I mean?
Mr. Chairman, there's no problem with that. And my clients are agreeable to that, if that is reassuring to Mr. Antosca.
I appreciate that. I would assume that it would be.
Motion
All
to
right, so
approve, motion to approve the special permit, Mr. Chair.
Second that.
The motion on the floor to approve the special permit by Mr. Murphy. It's seconded by Mr. Mulvihill. I'll again do a roll call vote on the special permit only. Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Mulvihill,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. I do have to ask, so Mr. Hearn, that you withdraw the request for the variance for technical purposes, please.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We're happy to withdraw that if the board agrees, as it appears to be unnecessary. And thank you very much for the vote in favor of the special permit.
Motion to approve the withdrawal of variance, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do I have a second on
Maybe
that?
somebody could-
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Riley. All those in favor, Mrs. Anderson on the withdrawal,
Aye.
Mr. Mulvihill,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
and Mr. Riley.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Let's withdraw them without prejudice. Thank you. All right, good
Thank
luck to
you.
you, Mr. Jacobs and Ms. Drummond.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night to everybody.
All right. I think we're all right on time, Ramonda, right? Yeah, we're good. Okay. All right, so the next up, and make sure we have everybody. I see Mr. Bailey, who represents the UAV. Again, if we could, anybody who's not involved in the meeting, if the spectator or if you're gonna speak in the future, if you could just mute yourself until you're called upon. I appreciate that. Thank you. Second hearing is notice hereby given to the Board of Appeal, November 17th, 7:15, the request of UAV LLC, Joseph Federico, manager, case number 20-08, with respect to property located on 18.4 acres of University Ave, assessors map number 22, sheet 7, lots 2 and 3 in the limited manufacturing district. The meeting will be conducted digitally using GoToMeeting. This application requests a renewal of an expired permit granted on January 31, 2013 under section 7.2, or in the alternative, the issuance of a new special permit pursuant to section 7.2 of the zoning bylaw to allow the gravel removal in excess of 10 cubic yards. I do have the notification, the newspaper notification and the affidavit present. I believe was dated on, I don't have that now that I have several notices. Notice dates June 11th, June 20th. Okay. Mr. Bailey, I'm going to ask the starters if we can move forward on this as a new permit. That's going to be my request.
That's fine with, yeah, that's absolutely fine with us. We specifically applied in the alternative as either a renewal or a new to give the board that flexibility. The application requirements are identical, whether it's new or renewal. So we're fine with the new special permit.
Only because of the expiration, I'd rather go with the new permit, frankly. So if we can go along with that, that would be great. So if you want to just identify yourself, and then I'll give you the floor, you can have at it, please.
Happy to do so. My name's Dan Bailey. I am a land use lawyer with the firm of Pierce Atwood in Boston. And with me tonight are Luke Fabry, who is the project's environmental consultant, and Joe Federico, who is the owner of UAV LLC, which owns the property at 973 University Avenue. That's the subject of this hearing. Just a few housekeeping things in case there are questions. Attorney James Hilliard submitted the original application several months ago. I took over from Mr. Hilliard when we needed to update the project plans to show the changes to the stormwater management system that resulted as due to an agreement with the Attorney General's office. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. You already mentioned that you have the tear sheets and the affidavit. So as stated, this is a special permit application for earth removal in the limited manufacturing district. And it's subject to section 7.2 of the zoning bylaw regarding earth removal. The property, just a little bit of history. I know most members of the board are pretty familiar with this property. The property is located at 973 University Avenue. It was purchased by UAV from the town of Norwood about 9 years ago. As stated in 2013, this board granted a special permit for earth removal, and UAV operated an earth removal facility there for about 7 years until March of this year. The business ran smoothly for 7 years without any issues regarding traffic, pollution, dust, wetlands, or other material adverse impacts. Approximately half of the total amount of earth material that can be removed has been removed from the site. It's an extremely clean and well-organized site, but, and we want to get this on the table, UAV was not as careful about its paperwork as it should have been. It failed to return to the board to renew the special permit as it should have, and that's why we're here tonight on an application for a new special permit. I also want to very briefly touch on the agreement that UAV entered into with the AG's office. I know that's not really something that's board's jurisdiction, but I'd ask the chair's indulgence for about 2 minutes just so I can explain it because there have been a lot of questions about it. Earth removal operations are required under the Federal Clean Water Act to submit a stormwater permit application to the Environmental Protection Agency. Upon submission of the application and compliance with EPA's regulations, the facility is automatically issued a permit by EPA. There's no permitting process like we have here or with other state permits. The owner simply files the correct paperwork that's certified by his consultant, and the permit is deemed granted. UAV, however, failed to file the stormwater permit application. It complied in all respects with the requirements for managing stormwater. There are detention basins on the site. Water's collected in the detention basins. There's certain overflow protections. There's berms. There's never been any. There's wetlands on the site, but there's never been any wetland impact from stormwater. But it did fail to file the paperwork, and that was a mistake. And it led to an enforcement action that was brought by the Attorney General's office in March of this year. The enforcement action was promptly settled, and UAV agreed to upgrade its stormwater management system to assure that no stormwater will be discharged from the site. And Mr. Fabry will explain the upgrades in a little bit of detail later. But in essence, what we're doing is we're going to capture all of the stormwater for up to a 100-year storm and just manage it on site so that there's nothing going off site, so there can be no issues. UAV now wants to complete the second phase of earth removal at this site. The purpose remains the same as in the original special permit, to make the site suitable for development. We don't know what sort of development will go there. That will be market driven when the site is ready, but it will be consistent with the uses allowed in the limited manufacturing district and other uses on University Avenue. I mean, could be warehouse is the obvious use, but there's a lot of demand, at least today, for another hotel on University Avenue. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and we will need all of the appropriate permitting at that time. So I'd like to turn it over now to Luke to give you a little bit more detail about the proposed work.
Luke, if you could just identify yourself for the record, please.
Good
Luke,
evening.
I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mike.
I was just turning on my camera and microphone. My name is Luke Fabry. I'm a licensed site professional with Geological Field Services in Salem, Mass. And they've given me the screen share, which I'm putting up the plan set that was submitted to the board for the permit application. There are 6 sheets. Sheet 1 is just an introductory. Sheet 2 is an existing conditions plan that shows the existing contours at the site. It shows the demarcation between what was labeled the former phase 1 and former phase 2. Originally, they were obviously labeled phase 1 and phase 2. There's a retention wall that was required by the AG's office that extends down in this direction, which provides a permanent barrier to any runoff that could occur, although it doesn't pitch in that direction. It comes down and tags into the driveway. And then there's a Florida berm that runs all the way down the driveway. So anything that would run along this wall gets kicked out into the driveway and into the existing detention basin that's in the southwest corner of the property. So if you look at the property now, the work area is this kind of flat area that my cursor is moving around in the central portion of the site. The volume, let me just, okay, so on this image is, the left image is the former phase 1, and the right side of, excuse me, the red hash is former phase 1, the unhashed is phase 2. And on the right side of this image is the existing surface as of today. And one of the issues that I think part of the problem with the phase one and the phase two was the planning of how to actually access the gravel that is on this site. If they had stripped everything along this phase one line, then there'd be no access to the top of the facility. There's an access road that runs now up the western side of the property where my cursor is moving and provides you access to this area. In the southwest corner, there's a stockpile of loam that is going to be used in part to regrade and vegetate the side slopes. So Joe's been working around this pile since they originally stripped it, and there's really no place to put this other than in phase one. So it's sitting there, and it's a stockpile that will eventually be screened. Some of it has been screened and reused to dress the side slopes as part of the regrading plan. If you look at the permitted excavation area on the left-hand side, it was permitted to have 207,785 square feet. The as-built right now for which would phase one is 208,338 feet. There's about 550 square feet of difference in what was proposed to be conducted in phase one and what has been conducted to date. The real difference is the shape, because what was proposed is not really practical. It's not feasible. Moving to the next slide. These are some specifications, and I did receive some comments from Mr. Ryan, the Public Works Director and town engineer. And there are some things that he would like to see added to this plan set. One of the items was on this page. There's a permeability tests. These were done prior to the original application, and they're on the original plan set. I need to have them transferred onto this plan set to show them where they exist. That's just the one on this page. There are a few other comments that were provided by Mr. Ryan. Okay, these two images are April 22nd, 2020. This is the proposed extent of phase two outlined by the red line and the side slope grading plan, where this pile of loam will be used to dress these side slopes all around the entire excavated area. The difference between this plan and the one that was submitted in the plan set, the engineer put on the stormwater controls, which I'm circling with my cursor, but the red line is incorrect. It's supposed to be at the 166-foot contour, and that is which is shown on this plan. You can see the difference right here. So I wanted to point that out. That needs to be corrected on the final plan set, along with vertical cross sections that were submitted. I'll go into that right now. These vertical cross sections that were submitted do not have any a vertical scale, and they don't have any elevations on them. So those need to be corrected. Mr. Ryan also asked for a site plan showing the locations of the cross section, because those weren't on the initial plan set. And they are shown on this plan. These lines right here coming across are the cross sections lines. They really weren't that apparent, but they are present. And we can make those so that they're more distinct. Let's see, I'm going to go back to this picture here. On this plan, they're showing the stormwater management system that is being proposed as part of an upgrade to the existing system. There's an upper detention basin which goes along Algonquin's gas line easement and parallels the access road to the site that exists now. The side of the detention basin along the Algonquin side is a concrete block retaining wall. Mr. Ryan had asked for a cross-section of this, which actually has been provided to the Conservation Commission that we'll be speaking about tomorrow night. And I can provide those with this plan set as well. I believe, let me see if I can, oops, I just closed my file. I'm gonna have to reopen that one. So this is the new detention basin. There's a spillway that was located by the engineer close to going onto the Algonquin property. This spillway is probably going to have to be moved because the depth of the excavation to construct it is about 2 feet. And according to some of the depth to the pipe in this easement that I was reading earlier today, it's only about 30 inches. So I discussed this with Mr. Federico, and I'm going to go back to the engineer to have them move this spillway further up the driveway so that it'll discharge. Right now it's going across the easement and discharging onto the driveway, which then spills down into the lower pond. I'm going to move this spillway to the west so that it does not have to dig down into the easement to be constructed, and it'll discharge onto the asphalt just probably 50 feet to the west. This has been designed to collect water from the entire site for a 100-year storm event, and the lower detention basin has been designed to collect the roadway runoff, the equipment runoff, everything that comes down the roadway, and hold it for a 100-year storm event. Part of the other work that the Attorney General wants us to complete is to cap 2 catch basins that are at the end of the driveway. Right now, they don't receive any water. The option was to remove them or to cap them. So we'll be capping those. All of the remaining work is largely outside of the buffer zone. The spillway will extend into the buffer zone, and we'll be going to the Conservation Commission tomorrow to present a notice of intent. And that pretty much summarizes what is being proposed and what has been completed to date. The volume of material that's been removed is right now about 1,000 yards more than what was approved of in phase 2. Excuse me, in phase 1. It's actually less than 1,000 yards. So it's very much on track of what they said they were going to do with regards to the volume removed and the area disturbed. The shapes are different, and the timeline is obviously, it's taken longer than 3 years to complete this bit of work, and it's probably going to take more than 3 years to complete the rest of the work. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And
I do have one question right out of the gate. What is from that red line, even though that's not the final plan, as you pointed out?
This
Yeah,
heavy red line.
the red line.
The heavy red line.
What's the
This one here.
distance between the red line, you were right.
This one here,
Yeah. What's the distance between the red line and the property behind it, in that area that looks like a fingerprint? What's the distance there? I can't read it.
Well, the scale on this is 1 inch equals 40 feet. I'm showing it over here, right here. That distance, looking at that scale, looks like it's roughly maybe a little bit over 40 feet from the very point to this edge here.
So there'd be 40 feet of distance between there?
Yes.
Okay,
See, on the right-hand side, there's a bar scale. And
yeah,
I'm going,
you're gonna have to explain that because I'm the youngest guy on the screen here and I can't see that to save my life. I don't have
Okay,
a pair of glasses.
going to.
Yeah, help me out here.
So what I'm doing is, here's the bar scale that I'm showing on the right-hand side of the image. So if you look at where my cursor is, this is 0, and that's 40 feet. And
Okay,
I mean, I can't hold a scale up to this on the screen, but I'm gonna come back over to this side and you know, the distance here looks like it's greater than this bar scale. Let me drag this wider.
let's call it equal. I wouldn't call it greater, but let's call it equal, but that's 40 feet. So
Yeah.
you're telling me that they're gonna dig, but not within 40 feet of the property line is what you're telling me.
At that particular location, yeah. So what this red line is, this is what they call a pre-split line. So what he would do is go in and drill, like you see on a road cut, this is all a rock face, by the way. There was one question that was asked, is how is this wall going to be constructed and held up? It's a rock face wall. It's not something that's going to be erected. It's going to be cut back to be a rock face wall. And to get a clean break on the rock, like you do for a road cut or for other, you know, places where they've cut into a face of rock, they're going to pre-drill the spacing, I think is like every couple of feet, pre-drill this line so that when it's the final removal takes place, that they have a nice clean rock face. It's not all jagged and you know, pockets and broken up. So when this comes around, this would be the final excavation. These heavy lines on the bottom are the contours, and I'll just make that a little larger. So the dashed lines are existing contours. So we're at 100 feet. It's actually going to come down a little bit across the floor of the operation to 98, 99, 100. It comes up to 106 in the back of the property. So there's a 6-foot grade, a 6-foot slope from back to front, which will shed water in that general direction. This face would be basically a rock face with the rear of it graded back, loomed and seeded. And these are the side slopes that you see that looks like a fingerprint all around the site. I don't think, so the red line only applies to where there's rock. There are some places where there is no bedrock exposed, like in the northwest corner here and in the south, actually, yeah, southeast corner down here. There's no rock that's going to be encountered.
If I could jump in here, Luke, could you point out, you know, the board is
Wait,
aware.
your audio is a little difficult on.
I'm sorry. Is that any better?
Yours is okay. His wasn't great, but go ahead.
Mine wasn't cleared? I'm sorry.
Okay.
You were clear enough, but you're coming in and out at the end there. So go ahead, Mr. Bailey.
There is an area that's been excavated that does go up to the property line with MS Walker where there has been some slumping. And I think it's important to point that out. You know, that occurred some years ago. So, you know, I want to make sure to be clear with the board and with everybody watching that there is an area where a small piece, and it's right in that corner, of property slumped and collapsed because it was less consolidated material than anticipated as it was being excavated. So the final grading in that particular location is not exactly as shown on this plan. We'll address that corner, but we'll have to address it given the existing slumping.
Okay. Mr. Luke, I'm sorry, I don't have your last name.
It's Fabry.
Fabry, okay. Do you,
Yeah, right.
I know, all right, then stick around. I know there's several questions that want to be asked, and some of them might be directed towards you. So are you all set, Mr. Bailey?
I'm all set. Available for
Okay.
questions, of course.
Okay, good. Appreciate that. So before we get into questions and stuff, I do have to say something publicly, and I do appreciate everybody's opinion, but suggestions, requests, opinions, whatever you want to call it, from anybody, whether they're in town, from the audience, whomever it is, they're certainly welcome. But I have to ask again that they're done in a timely manner. I can't have something dumped on my lap at the 11th hour, especially with something as complex as this, and be expected to construe everything into one and do it in a precise manner. I don't think it's fair to myself or the other board members. So anybody that wants input on any particular case, okay, I would appreciate all submissions on a timely manner, preferably the Thursday before the meeting. Going forward, the one question I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Bailey. I'm going to ask you. When did this permit that you guys had for this expired when? In 2016? Is that correct?
I think it was 2015. It was a 2-year permit, and it was issued in 2013.
Okay, so 2015. Okay. With this information.
It actually, Dan, according to the planning board, it expired on January 8th, 2016. That was the planning board's comment letter.
Well, it was issued on January 31st, 2013.
That's what he said, yep.
Yep, and it says completion 2 years from date of certification by the town clerk. So that was actually probably a couple of weeks after that, but it probably was 2015.
Okay.
And I mean,
All right, I tell you what, fellas, I'm not asking that on a technical purpose. I'm asking that to show and actually wonder why it took so long to realize that the permit had expired. But regardless of that, let's move on. Let's move on, because I know there's several questions in regards to this application. So what, Mr. Mulvihill, Mr. Murphy rather, could I start with you? And could I take this design off of the screen, please? Whoever's put that up there. Unless there's a technical question on the design.
No,
But,
I have
Mr.
some questions, but I think I have one. First one is for Mr. Fabry. You indicated that you had addressed Mr. Ryan's issues. Have all of Mr. Ryan's issues been addressed at this point?
No, I had just picked a couple of the, they were relative to the plans that I was showing. There are 9 comments that Mr. Ryan had provided. I can share those again if you'd like me to, but I can read them as well. So the first comment was
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sheets 3 of 4 list permeability tests. Please show the locations on the plan, which I said we will do. The cross sections, number 2, cross-sections do not show elevations on the Y or vertical scale, which is, they don't, and it will be corrected. The locations of the cross-sections show the locations on the plan view. They're on there, but they're difficult to see, and I will make them more clear. Maybe just have a plan with just those on them. Then it says, there appears there'll be a substantial wall required to be constructed. And I believe he's referring to the sharp face was where I said that we're not, Joe's not constructing a wall, it's going to be a rock face. So there's actually no construction for that wall. Fall protection must be provided at the top of the wall. The site is currently fenced, and the fencing will remain in place. Number 6 is that UAVE needs to relocate the fence that is encroaching on the abutting 975 property. And when we're pointing at that little finger that sticks out, you can see on that how the fence cuts across the end of it because the side slope is unstable, and that needs to be corrected with the final grading and relooming. And then he asked for a plan and profile of the proposed catch basin and the outlet pipe. Those plans have been submitted to Concom, and we can provide them to the ZBA as well. And then the 8th comment was to set a date, a set date should be established for when final looming and seeding of all disturbed areas is to be completed. With respect to that comment, I was trying to figure out, like, when that is going to occur. And it seems like there's a moving timeline as to, how much can be taken out there, how quickly. There has to be a market to get rid of it, etc. And my initial thought was maybe that could be like a performance standard that says something to the effect of, when a final grade has been achieved and the area is no longer being used, as part of the operations, that it should be graded and reseeded within something like a 60-day period. And when I say areas that are being used, the floor of the operation has achieved final grade, but they're driving trucks back and forth over it. So it's still in play. And that's a comment that I just put out there from when I've dealt with regulations in the past, is that you don't want it to linger on forever. But when you set a hard date, if you miss that date because it took longer to get the rock out or for whatever reason, well, then you're in violation of the permit, even though you haven't gotten to that point yet. And like I said, that's just my take on that. The last comment was that a substantial number of trees were removed for this mining operation, and that he recommends that a robust tree planting plan be included for approval of the special permit request. And Mr. Federico is working on this property to redevelop it for, or to make it suitable for a future use. And obviously planting trees in the floor of the mining operation is not, that's where whatever ends up being built there is going to be. So the only place that you can put them is up on the side slopes. And, we need to speak to somebody who's more knowledgeable of planting trees on that kind of a side slope. I know the top of the facility can handle it because that's flatter. But some of the side slopes are relatively steep, and I don't, personally, I don't know what you're going to be able to plant on that in terms of large trees.
So that kind of segues into my next question, Mr. Chair, which is probably to Attorney Bailey. Mr. Halkiotis, in a letter he sent us from the planning department, indicated that he would like to see a closure plan, which kind of talks about what you're going to do with the property at the end of the day. But I guess from your initial statement, you're saying that that's premature at this point to do a closure plan?
I think it's premature to do a closure plan that shows, an anticipated building and use, because we're not entirely, we could put a building envelope and potential parking on a plan, but what's going to really happen, it's nothing but speculation. What's going to really happen in 5 or 10 years when this gets redeveloped is unknown. At that time, this board, not this, but the planning board will have the ability to review a site plan, because some sort of site plan review will be required.
So I guess I've never seen anything like this, and I actually sat on the original 2013 hearing as an associate member. I guess my point is I haven't seen anything like this. Is this more of a planning board? Did Mr. Halkiotis put that in there? I mean, I'm not gonna, you can't speak for him, but is that more of a planning board function to get kind of what the final end project is gonna look like with a site plan?
I think it is. I mean, your job, at least under the bylaws, I read it, is to determine whether the use is appropriate, and you have certain standards that you have to evaluate the use and certain impacts. But details about the site itself is typically more of a planning board function.
So let me go back to Mr. Fabry. Sorry he got up. I hope he's still listening. Those issues that Mr. Ryan, other than number 4 and number 8, which I guess and number 9 to a certain degree, which he's addressed, how long will the other ones take to address that Mr. Ryan has raised? Is there a timeline? What's that going to take?
To put the permeability tests on and stuff like that?
Yeah, all that stuff that you said that you were going to do or needed to fix on your plans.
Within the week.
Okay.
I mean, some of them have been done. They're just not like the cross sections. I need to get the engineer to put elevations on the cross section. So it's all paperwork that was requested, or documentation that's requested. So the only one that probably can't get done right away is number 6, which is relocate the fence on the abutting property, because that slope is not stable.
And how long will it take to stabilize that slope?
They're gonna have to make that final cut. I don't know how long that takes.
Okay. So my next question is probably for Mr. Bailey again. Looking at the original permit, under environmental impacts, it indicated that at the time you were before us in 2013, or your applicant was before us in 2013, that the Conservation Commission and Department of Environmental Protection, their filings have been completed satisfactorily. So you're talking about your consent reviews with the EPA, which is a federal agency. This talked about a DEP filing, and what would that be in regard to, and why was that not addressed, the EPA thing not addressed at the same time in 2013?
We blew it. I mean, it's the blunt answer.
Okay.
It should have been done. I mean, to give it some context, and then not to make an excuse, these stormwater filings were still relatively new then. Again, it's not an excuse, but it was a relatively new requirement.
Do you know what the DEP filing that you referenced, or that your prior counsel referenced at that hearing? What's the DEP filing then?
The only thing I
Is that
can
the same
think
thing?
would be the wetlands. The administration of the State Wetlands Protection Act. That's done by the local Concom, but it is a DEP program.
Okay.
Yeah, the DEP has the stormwater management plan that was submitted with the notice of intent. We actually just submitted another stormwater management plan with the notice of intent.
No, no, Mr. Fabry, I was talking to Mr. Bailey about the 2013, the original application, not this new one.
There was one submitted with the 2013 application.
Oh.
So the DEP has a stormwater management plan requirement as part of the notice of intent. And then beyond that, there's what they call a SWIP, which is Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, which is required if there's a potential for a discharge off the site. That SWIP relies on the EPA NIPD's permit, general permit for the discharge. So both agencies manage the stormwater, and they're very much redundant programs. And I think that might have been part of the issue, is where Mr. Federico thought that he had a stormwater management plan that was submitted with the notice of intent that was what he had to follow, and not realizing that there were these other steps that come behind it.
Got it.
So when you
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
All
man,
right, thank you. Mr. Riley, you available? Is Phil still on there? I don't see him.
He's still on, but he looks muted.
Still on.
So you want to make sure you're not muted? Sorry, I can't see him. Is he speaking or?
I can't see him either. I'm gonna give him a call right now. Hold on.
I just want to make sure if we skip to somebody else, he can hear us.
I see him on the screen, Mr. Chair, but his camera and his microphone are both off.
Okay. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Reminder, we having any luck with that?
For some reason, it's not allowing him to unmute himself, so he might have to leave and come back into the room real quick.
Okay.
Can we check Jack Perry too? Jack, are you there? So we don't go through this again?
No, I'm here.
Okay, very good. You don't have your camera on, is that, but your audio is good. So the only one we need help on is Phil Riley.
I thought it was on.
Yeah, you're on, we can
You're
hear you.
all right, Jack. You're all right. You're all right, Jack. Just leave it there. As long as you can see and as long as you can hear us and we can hear you.
Yep.
Hello. Now let me try the camera. Good. Good. You're a genius. You're a genius.
Reminder is the best, by the way.
Definitely. All right,
All
so
right,
hopefully,
can we,
I assume you heard Mr. Murphy's line of questioning and so forth. If you want to
I
follow
did,
that up.
I did hear all of Mr. Murphy's questioning and the answers, yes. So I'm all right with that.
Okay, if you
So
want,
I guess
you
we're
want-
ready to go.
if you want to, if you want to go next, that'd be great.
But,
Can you turn your microphone on?
yeah, hang on.
He's on, we can hear you, Phil.
Yeah, it is on.
You're good to go.
They say we're good. Whoop, they said we're good to go. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The questions that I had, I was not sure whether either Mr. Bailey or Mr. Barbary could answer them best. And I think Mr. Barbary's covered some of these matters in the presentation. But the consent decree that's been referenced included 7 items that needed to be done. And I just wondered if all of them had been done or part of them had been done. I was going to read them off, if you don't mind. The first one calls upon to build a block retaining wall connecting 2 existing retaining walls to inhibit the flow of stormwater off the southern edge of the facility as shown in Exhibit A. Has that been done?
That was constructed, yes.
That's been done, okay. The second thing says to install a stone waterway near the mobile equipment fueling area to reduce sediment transport by stormwater or equipment from the unpaved portion of the facility to the driveway. Has that been done?
Yes, that's actually a routine operation. So what they do is they put a gravel apron from where they transfer from the mining operation to the driveway to minimize the sediment transport onto the driveway. And that's done repeatedly. So as it gets clogged, it's removed and replaced. So the answer is
at
yes.
the present time, has it been done at the present time?
It has been done, and it's required to continue to be done as part of the operation. Yes.
Okay. The third thing was, and I think you mentioned this, was the construction of a second detention basin uphill and to the east of the facility's driveway. Has that been done?
A portion of it has been constructed, but we can't finish it. The other portion of it, because it's in the buffer zone until we get a notice of intent, an order of conditions from the Concom. A portion of it has been done, and the AG's office has given us an extension to January 15th because we had to go through additional permitting to construct what they asked for.
Okay. The next thing was to build a new block retention wall adjacent to the second detention basin. Has that been done?
That has not been done either. That's pending the order of conditions.
Okay.
Let
The
me,
next thing,
back
okay, go ahead.
one thing on that one is Holly Jones from the Conservation Commission actually said that if we want to move forward with that before the order of conditions is issued, we can, because all of that work is outside of the Concom's jurisdiction.
Okay. The next thing is expand the existing detention basin so that both detention basins will together contain all stormwater generated during a 100-year storm event. Is that expansion taking place?
That part of it has taken place, but that has not been completed. Correct. We're still, we got a cease and desist from the Conservation Commission.
Right, I understand that.
Right, so that's going to be addressed as soon as we go through that process.
Okay. There were 2 more things. One was to regrade the facility, I'm reading it, regrade the facility driveway where it intersects with University Avenue to ensure that all stormwater flowing down the driveway is directed into the detention basin and does not leave the facility. Has that been done?
That, there's no water that leaves this facility as it exists today. And Joe is going to cap, there's 2 catch basins at the mouth of the driveway, cap those so that no water can enter them. They right now.
That was actually the last, excuse me, that was actually the last one that was that they had talked about, of either capping them or plugging them. So that one, that has been done, I take it.
If you go out to the site during a storm event, all of the water that comes down the driveway goes into the detention basin at the bottom of the driveway, as does everything from University Ave pitches back in the same direction already. So the existing conditions when they wrote that actually did what they asked it to be doing. I'm not sure why that came in. We tried to explain to them, and I gave them photographs and a video that shows the water is actually flowing back to the detention basin as it exists. So to answer that question, it was done before they wrote that.
Okay, all right. So from your perspective, that's something that doesn't need to be done because it goes to the basin already, essentially.
There's a finished grade. Right now he has binder coat, and University Ave drops, there's like a 2-inch lip. So there's no water that's leaving, and we're gonna put steel plates over the catch basins.
Okay.
That's not been done yet. Those catch basins are in the buffer zone.
Thank you. One question for Mr. Bailey, I guess. What is the present transportation routes that are followed? Do they primarily use University Ave and Route 1 and 95, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why it's such a good location for a facility like this, because, you know, there's absolutely no need for trucks to go through any neighborhood. You know, if they're going to go south on 95, you know, they go.
They don't drive through. Right, right. They don't drive through small neighborhoods and all of that.
No, it would make no sense.
That's all I have for now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Riley. Mr. Perry, if you want to go next, please.
To the plans that I just got tonight. Is the, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry if I didn't know if I hit the right button or not. I was looking for a plan of as-built, as what work has been done on the site up to now. And I know Phil had brought up one of the questions I also had. So I guess my concerns are, I know everything's going to be done correctly, and I'm very familiar with the developer, and I'm sure he'll do a great job, but I would like to have, and I didn't look through the package that I have in front of me, is there an as-built as to the scope of work that has been done now on the site?
There is an existing conditions component of the plan that shows how it shows existing conditions, yes.
Yeah.
Page 2 it's actually 1 of 4 is an existing conditions plan.
Okay, one through 4?
No, 1 of 4.
1 of 4, I'm sorry.
Right, after the title page, the next page is an existing conditions plan.
Because I know I did not have a lot of time to look at this, but I will be spending probably most of my office tomorrow on the plans that were submitted tonight to review it.
Yes.
And
So-
I'm concerned about runoff, obviously, because I think you people are too. And I mean, it's a tough site you have to deal with, that's for sure. And I'm also familiar, I've worked with United Consultants, and they're a good group of engineers. So I think we're in good hands, but I will probably have a bunch of questions tomorrow. And I don't know if I can talk to anybody tomorrow.
I'm going to be in the field all day tomorrow in Cambridge, but we do have a Conservation Commission meeting tomorrow, and I will be in my office probably by 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock. And I can certainly give you my phone number if you'd like to call me.
I would, if I could, please. And you're Luke, right?
My name's Luke, and the last name is Fabry, Fabbri. And my cell phone number is 781
781. I'm sorry, 781.
254 2603.
2600.
2603.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that.
And you were Mr. Perry?
And I will be on site tomorrow.
Okay.
Mr. Perry, anything else?
No, I got just a lot to digest here, which I will do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mulvihill, you're up.
Couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fabry, from a layperson standpoint, is there an erosion potential problem over there? I know the site, I've walked it. I think I'm answering my own question because of the rock wall. But is there an erosion issue, a potential erosion issue with that slumping corner that Dan had referenced?
It needs to be vegetated, revegetated to stabilize it.
When are you planning on doing that?
That's kind of last, the revegetation of the side slopes are last on the list.
So there's no imminent threat of that thing collapsing and then we're gonna have like a mudslide or again, I'm a lake here, so it's.
When I went out and looked at it, what I believe is the issue is that it's very sandy. It's not gonna be a mudslide, but the vegetation was taken off of it and the sand moved. And I think it's reached its stable point. It doesn't seem like it's been moving anymore. But to get to it and stabilize it, they're gonna have to be putting some material back up there, which is gonna require them to finish what they're doing below it before they can work above it.
Thank you, Mr. Fabry. Councilor Bailey, I did not sit on the decision in 2013. I was looking at the date. I don't know where I was, but the permit was for 2 years. But can you explain the genesis of why you're here? What happened? Obviously, Joe didn't renew the permit. He's been held accountable to the degree of a hefty fine and a consent decree, which I have a couple of questions on. But can you just give a synopsis of what happened and why you're here? Did one of the town's boards catch a red light, or what happened?
Well, what happened is the building inspector became aware of the expired permit, went out to the site, saw that there was work going on, and issued a cease and desist order.
Very good. The consent decree that you entered in with the Attorney General's office that Phil was questioning you on,
Yes.
who inspects those items to make sure that they're done? Is it our Conservation Commission, or is it a fellow or a woman from the AG's office?
It's the AG's office, yeah.
And they come out periodically, and how does that happen?
They send people unannounced. I mean, we have obligations to report to them regularly, as we get this work done. And, to make annual reports regarding the stormwater system and whether it's working, and Mr. Fabry would do those reports. But what they'll do, honestly, is they'll watch for the weather and they'll watch for a big rain event, and then they'll just come out and, they can literally park down at the bottom of University Avenue and they can see whether the system is working or not, because if the water is being collected in that bottom detention basin is not coming off the site, then it's working.
Just for the record, in 2013, when the board approved the decision, I don't think anything is really, well, obviously some things have changed in the sense that, you know, I'll use the euphemism that Joe stubbed his toe here, didn't renew the permit or didn't apply for a new permit because there was a time and a length that was issued on the special permit of 2 years. Before I get into my little statement here, a comment, what is the request that you're putting forward here, Dan? The board issues a 2-year limit on the special permits. You're not going to be done in 2 years. So are you going to come in at the end of 2 years and ask for a 6-month extension, or how are you handling that if you know that 2 years isn't going to fulfill the need of the issue?
Mr. Molt, you're getting at kind of the nub of one of the issues here, which is, and you know, well, I'll explain it. I mean, as you said, all special permits are issued for 2 years, but typically a special permit requires that the work be commenced within 2 years. And to tell you the truth, when this question of expiration first came up, I said to Mr. Federico, geez, the way I read this is the way I read a typical special permit. And I was wrong, but that's the way I read it, is what it really means is that you just have to start the work, commence construction within 2 years, which is what the statute requires. So what we're asking for here tonight is a special permit without a time limit, because we're certainly not going to be done in 2 years. We'll start work.
Dan, thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, can I have a little latitude? Can I ask Mr. Riley, being the senior member here, and I know we've run into this before, Phil, and different requests for extensions that are issued on special permits. Doesn't our language, and I know Dan referenced the legislation or the law, but doesn't our verbiage say diligent efforts must be made towards completion? And that was a vague issue that we've wrestled with in the past when we put the air quotes up, diligent efforts.
I'm not sure that I have a specific recollection of that term. I know we've wrestled with this, as you point out, on a number of occasions. I think we've basically followed the statute in terms of whether or not some substantial use had been commenced. Of course, it's a little hard, as I think Mr. Bailey's been talking about, to apply it to this case, because it's not like you're constructing a building and it's going to be done in 2 years. I mean, this is pretty much an ongoing operation, and as I think Mr. Fabry was pointing out, it's very difficult to figure out when it's going to end and when it's going to be ready to construct a building. So it's something we have to think about. In fact, Mr. Bailey talked about a permit without an expiration date. I'm not sure we've ever done that, and we'd have to look into it a little bit more as to how we would best handle that.
Let me interject here. Let me interject for 1 second. Is Mr. DeLuca still on the line?
Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Okay, would you mind elaborating a little on your opinion on that answer, please?
Sure. I did a little bit of research today. I found a couple of cases that do sort of speak to this issue. And while I agree the more common circumstance for boards is to wrestle with the commencement of work within a 2-year period, this is a sort of a different take on that aspect, which is can we set a limit on completion within a special permit? I did find a couple of cases that speak to that issue. One is an SJC case that is Bernstein the Falmouth case that indicates that where special permit contains a no time limit, there's no basis to conclude the special permit has lapsed. It also goes on to say that that where a court went on to conclude that where a developer anticipates completing work in stages, has begun construction within 2 years and a substantial use has commenced, as is the case here, authority to complete the project continues absent express language to the contrary in the permit. From that, I'm understanding that it is reasonable for the board to set a time limit for completion of a project. And the same case says that authorities granting special permits may impose conditions, safeguards, and limitations on time or use. So where there is no time limitation, then the authority continues indefinitely. But the implication from this case is that it is reasonable for the board to set a time limit for completion.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation, Mr. DeLuca. I tell you what, to revisit that subject, why don't we hopefully agree that if and when the time comes, if this application is approved, we as a board will come up with an arbitrary number that's fair to both the town and the applicant. And Pac, if you can follow up with any other questions you might have from that, please.
David, first of all, good to see you, Counselor. I'm sorry I didn't reference you. I've just seen so many people on the screen here, but I think the members know this very well, is that we've been very liberal with giving extensions. And I don't need to remind anybody on this board of one matter that went on for almost 10 years. It was Mr. Robichaud's matter down at the Ponset Street for completion of the condominium complex. And he virtually, all he did was pour foundations and then he let it sit. And we kind of hamstrung ourselves in there and we're, you know, he kept coming in with excuse after excuse. That being what it may, this particular applicant had a 2-year time limit and was working towards completion. And again, he stubbed his toe. He didn't come in the proper way and ask for an extension, and he's been held accountable for it. So I don't want to beat up on the applicant and what happened and what transpired, because he's been held to bear, and you know, to the tune of a lot of money. And but I think the underlying theme that I want to reference here to the board and to the town is that there was a lot of arguments being made on this property because the applicant came in for a permit or an application to put an asphalt plant down there, and that didn't succeed. But what's going on down there now hasn't changed from what our initial, or the board, and again, I was absent on the approval, said yes to. And let me just read for the record, Mr. Chairman, if I may. In their deliberation, the board found the following special permit conditions to exist: social, economic, and community needs. The proposed earth removal operation will supply materials for local use. It will pay taxes on the current site and will generate future taxes on the proposed final building sites. The circulation. This site has a private access and will not generate any additional volume, which will impact and compete for roadway capacity. 60 trips over the course of a day from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. is anticipated, 1 trip every 10 minutes. Utilities and other public services. The utility connections will include electric and telephone for the current proposal. Water, sewer, and gas will be subject to a future site plan application, while drainage will be completed under this proposal. Environmental impacts. A filing with the Town of Norwood Conservation Commission, the Department of Environmental Protection, has been satisfactorily completed. This was in 2013. Land use compatibility. Earth removal is an accepted use and is a first step in the development of this site, preparing it for a future site. Suitable compatible site development. The visual compatibility component. The operation will be buffered by a 120-foot vegetative buffer from the street and is approximately 160 feet from the abutting entrance drive. Fiscal impacts. The property has been taken from the non-tax paying column and is now fully tax paying property for the town. As the site develops, the taxable contributions will increase. in the process. A meeting and several discussions have taken place with the abutting property, which was in the former Montignetti property, CCM Realty Trust, regarding the proposed development and for possible alternatives which could be mutually beneficial. Let me remind the board too, and the people in the town, that this town rejected a proposal to keep the property. They put it up for sale. Mr. Federico bought it in an open bidding process, and he's a private landowner, and he's got to adhere to certain permits and criteria and rules and regulations. But he bought it, the town didn't want it, and we are where we are because of a misstep by Mr. Federico. But any talk of not allowing this to continue, I think is a little heavy-handed in my humble opinion, Mr. Chairman, and that's all. Thank you very much.
All right, we definitely appreciate your input. All right, I mean, like I said, going forward, we'll decide on a time limit when the time comes, if and when the time comes. I mean, I think it'd be fair to, again, it'd be fair to protect the board. I think it'd be fair to the applicant on going both ways in regards to that. So is there anything else from the board? Okay, I cannot see everybody. I know there's a couple people here that want to speak in regards to this. Ramanda, if you could help me out, because I can't see everybody and I don't dare touch the screen because I'll lose everybody. So if we want to do one at a time, if you want to just let me know who you are and who you represent, and then you can state your business, please. Everybody that I have on screen is a part of this, with the exception of Mr. Plasko. But anybody else, I cannot see anybody else from under. So if you want to tell me.
Yeah, I see Maxwell Young.
Mr. Young, if you'd like to speak, please just identify yourself, who you are, and your address, please.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Max Young. I'm the facilities manager for MS Walker at 975 University Ave. We are here represented by our counsel and Dennis McKenna. I'm just here in support of him.
Okay, thank you. Is Mr. McKenna on there?
Yes, I'm on, Mr. Chairman. Dennis McKenna from the Boston law firm of Reamer and Bronstein, representing MS Walker. And as Mr. Young said, they're at 975 University Ave. Mr. Scott Allen is also on the call from MS Walker. He's one of the principals.
Does Mr. Allen want to speak, or are you going to speak on his behalf?
Well, I'm going to speak. He may want to speak, but I'm going to speak on, I believe, on the behalf of MS Walker at the pleasure of the board.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay, I didn't know if you were just having everyone identify themselves or you were looking for our position. So good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members.
Reminder is going to let me know who's on there, and then we're going to go person to person if anybody has any input on the case. So if you want to start, be my guest.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as indicated, I represent MS Walker. We are the next door neighbor and a butter to UAV LLC. We are here to ask the board to protect the safety and property of MS Walker, who's a very good corporate citizen of Norwood, as has been discussed somewhat, although very little discussion really. This applicant is in violation of two permits issued by the town, one from this board, the Stormwater Protection Act and Wetlands Protection Act. While I agree with one of the members of the board that he has been held accountable by the Attorney General's office because he was caught violating the the Stormwater Protection Act and the Wetlands Protection Act, he's not been held accountable for the violation of the site plan permit or the special permit. In fact, once we realized that Mr. Federico, which I'll detail in a moment, had trespassed onto our property, had destroyed parts of our property, had cut down over 30 trees, and wasn't going to stop, we had to request the assistance of the building commissioner, who went out and issued a cease and desist order. And because of the all of the destruction that the applicant has caused, actually, in addition to the cease and desist order, the building commissioner required the installation of a fence, a safety fence, because of what had occurred there with ongoing operations, the 5 years of excavation without a permit. One of the questions.
Mr. McKenna, let me interrupt real quick. Wouldn't the cease and desist order and the insistence of the installation of the fence be held, holding them accountable for his actions?
Well, the cease and desist stopped him from violating the expired permit any further. You'd have to ask the building commissioner, but the installation of the fence was because, and you asked the question, Mr. Brady, of Mr. Fabry, and I won't challenge Mr. Fabry from the corner point that you mentioned as a fingerprint. There might be 40 feet to the red line that was put on the screen. You couldn't walk those 40 feet. If you were on that corner, you actually couldn't stand on the corner of what used to be MS Walker property, because based upon the unpermitted excavation that was ongoing for those 5 years, basically they have undermined the property of MS Walker to the point that although there was some phrase about stumble, our property is actually falling into their property, not because of anything we have done, but because of the unpermitted activities of the applicant. So the 40 feet, you'd have to get an airplane to fly it, because you couldn't even take one step. There's a steep slope there that goes down 70 or 80 feet. You can't even, when we asked our engineers to go back to our property line where a stake had been, they couldn't even put another stake in. They had to measure back from where the stake had been on our property line, because that property had fallen in based upon the activities of the applicant. So that slope there, where Mr. Fabry had mentioned 40 feet, that's 40 feet of air. The slope goes straight down probably 70 or 80 feet. And that doesn't even.
Let me interrupt you one more time. Let me interrupt you, and I excuse me, please. I apologize for the interruption. I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. Did they not already agree to put up a fence separating the property upon the completion of the excavation?
That's unknown to me. That I don't know that.
I thought it was mentioned earlier. Did I mishear something?
I didn't hear anything about a fence.
Okay, maybe let me go back and look at my notes. But okay, go ahead. Excuse me.
If I can interrupt you, is for Mr. Ryan, he had asked to relocate a fence. And I had made the comment that there is a perimeter fence around the property that cuts across that triangle.
Wasn't there also a mention of re-sloping the grade and vegetate, if I'm saying the right term, vegetating it upon completion as well?
Yes, slope stabilization.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. McKenna, please.
Excuse me.
Sure. So the applicant, if this applicant had come to this board when it originally came and got the approval, and if it had told you as part of phase one, it was going to come onto the abutters property and cut down over 30 trees, destabilize the abutters property, which has happened. There's not even a question. They admit doing it, minimized it, but they admit doing it. And what they've also done is all along the property line, they've cut down all of the trees that acted as a buffer. Would this board back in 13 have given them the approval? Looking at some of the conditions, visual compatibility, it's not compatible to their neighbor, MS Walker, to cut down not only the trees that go right up to the border of your property. They cut down our property. They cut down all of our trees on our property. So there's no buffer in the area, what Mr. Fabry had correctly described as the top of the property. They cut it all down. It's all gone. And part of the
up to the fence, correct?
well, the fence didn't exist when they were doing the cutting. What happened, Mr. Brady, was Mr. Federico had approached Mr. Allen to try to buy some of the MS Walker property, which we weren't interested in selling. Mr. Federico indicated he was going to continue his excavation. We didn't know he didn't have a permit, but he did say, I won't get within 20 feet of the property line. And we were not in my backyard type people. That seemed fine to Mr. Allen until he could see out his front window at MS Walker, the excavators at the top of the hill, cutting down all the trees right up to the property line. So as the board that's partly here to grant special permits, but do so in a way that protects the public health and safety and doesn't produce observable effects at lot line. I'm just reading the earth removal bylaw, which requires a finding that by this board that the operations will not be dangerous. They will not produce observable effects at the lot lines. They will not have a material adverse effect on the health and safety of persons living in the neighborhood under 7.2.3 of the earth removal bylaw. All of that is exactly what's occurred with regard to their own neighbor. We can't go to the property line because, as you have correctly pointed out, the building inspector required for safety for them to put a temporary fence on our property. They couldn't even put it on their property because of the slope. So they're not even complying with what was provided. If they had told you they were going to do all this, I would respectfully suggest that this board wouldn't have granted them the initial permit. And now they're coming in after 5 works without a permit and asking you to extend without a final plan. There's nothing that we have seen which we could even, there's no renditions or elevations which we have seen where we know what's going to observe. And it's basically clear cutting the whole site, destabilizing our property, and violating several provisions of the earth removal bylaw. So with all due respect, we respectfully oppose this. We think that because it's such a significant excavation, if any member of the board hasn't been out, we welcome members of the board to our property. We would love to have a site visit to show what our concerns are, to see what's there. This is a significant operation which is impacting MS Walker. It's the safety of anyone that would go to its lot line, and basically they've destroyed not only our real property, which is eroding into their property, but they've destroyed our trees.
All right, I'm not sure I agree with you on everything. I do see your concerns, but I have to say, to me, this sounds more like a civil matter rather than a zoning issue. But I do respect your opinion. So
Well,
if you have anything else.
Well, just on that, so it's not a civil matter because, sure, if we wanted to, we could, and as Mr., and I won't get into discussions that I've had with Mr. Bailey, I'll keep those between the two of us. But what's not a civil matter is protecting neighbors from what they do on the property. The courts are not going to tell Mr. Federico what he can and can't do on his property. That's, with all due respect, Planning Board and ZBA, and that's why we're here. We have not commenced a lawsuit. MS Walker is not a litigious organization. We are a very good corporate citizen of Norwood, but we should be able to come to this board and ask this board to protect us.
Okay. Reminder, who's next on the list?
Mr. Chair, could I interject with a question? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Mr. McKenna, is there a setback? this board were to approve another permit, would there be a setback requirement that would satisfy MS Walker?
Well, we would definitely want a buffer zone, a vegetated tree buffer. And we're willing to discuss that. So far, our efforts at those discussions for a buffer have not gone anywhere.
Well, no, I'm asking, as you're in a butter, representing in a butter, talking to the zoning board, that you would suggest to the zoning board it would be a reasonable condition for a buffer zone or a setback between your property and the excavation.
I would certainly talk to MS Walker. It didn't sound like the board's going to vote tonight, so I would definitely, Mr. Murphy, I'd be prepared at the next hearing to certainly address that issue. Something suitable. I'm familiar with the first decision, which talked about a 120-foot vegetative buffer and a 160-foot vegetative buffer. But I'm certainly willing to discuss that with MS Walker.
I believe that, Mr. McKenna, I believe that was for the front of the property, though. That was,
Yes.
that was. I'm talking about at the rear of the property where you're saying there's the issue where the property where there's an issue, I guess is my point.
Yes. So if you needed an answer for tonight, I could consult with MS Walker, but I definitely have one for you by the next hearing.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Mr. Fabry on Scott's same question there, while Mr. McKenna is on the line here. Luke, didn't you say that phase 3 is the final line, that where you said you're moving that line that was on the plan that needed to be corrected? Doesn't that give the buffer, is that the final line as far as your excavation? You're not going to dig any farther than that?
That red line was a pre-cut line for the granite, or the stone. I won't call it granite. I'm not sure what kind of stone it is. That's a pre-cut line for the stone. Above the stone, there was and is unconsolidated overburden, the sand and gravel. The loom portion of that has been taken off, but there's still sand and gravel above the stone. So that from that red line to the corner of the MS Walker's property is where they had slumping and erosion of the sand that took out the corner of that property.
So currently constituted. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not the limit of the red line is not the limit of excavation. The red line is the face of the rock wall.
Currently constituted as it stands right now, Dan and Luke, where are you digging to? Are you going right to the property line in the future? In 3 years from now, when you're sitting here, is Mr. McKenna, on behalf of MS Walker, going to be saying, hey, wait a minute, he dug right to the fence line?
No, not at all. And I'd point out that you have I know it just came in today, but you do have a memo from the planning director who addresses these issues. And he says the board should consider how phase 1 operations have impacted the abutter located at 975 University Avenue, clearing trees and excavating abutting property. The board should include a condition of approval that will prevent future impacts to abutting property owners, such as not allowing any future excavation within 15 feet of any property lines. Earth removal bylaws in other towns usually have a setback from the property line requirement. And we're completely fine with that. In fact, I think our plans call for 20-foot setback. I'd also just likely, Mr. Chair, if I could, to respond to a couple of the items raised by Mr. McKenna.
Sure.
We don't dispute that our tree cutter went over the property line and cut down 25 to 30 trees. We have been prepared. We remain prepared to replace those trees. We have not ever received an answer to that. Again, I don't think that's really an issue for this board, but we do want to try and work that out. That was our mistake. Similarly, there was slumping that has affected MS Walker's property. We're prepared to make good on that in some way. Again, probably not through this board process. You know, we're trying to make things right now. And, you know, that's part of this process. That's part of the Attorney General process. So, oh, the other thing I did want to mention, the tree at the very top, there remains, I can't remember if it's 20 or 40 feet of trees, Luke might remember, but there does remain a good sized buffer between the back of our property and that area of the MS Walker property where the building is located.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move on though. We're getting late. I'm gonna move on to the, 1 second, please. Chris, do I have a Chris on the line? Chris, you still with us? If you're muted, maybe? You still there, Ramanda? All right, how about Scott? Scott there?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, Scott, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, this is Scott Allen.
I'm looking, Scott, is there an MS Walker representative, Mr. Scott Allen?
That's me, correct.
Did
Scott
you
from
want to
MS
speak,
Walker.
sir? Okay, go ahead and speak if you'd like to, sir.
Thank you. I don't want to reiterate what Dennis McKenna already said, but we have had some issues next door. Hopefully, some of the problems will hopefully be vetted out during this process, but there have been some serious violations that we have some very serious concerns, and we believe that there's potential damage to our property. There is damage to our property, future damage to our property, and could affect the value of our property. And other than that, I'll just let Dennis, our attorney, speak for MS Walker, but thank you for your time.
Okay, do we, is Maxwell Young still on there? Mr. Young, did you have anything else to add?
No, Mr. Chair, I do not.
All right, thank you. And did Mr. Federico want to be heard on this?
No, thank you,
Yeah,
Chair.
does
I'm
Mr.
good.
Federico? Okay, thank you.
Joe,
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on that wants to be heard that I'm not recognizing? Billy, Mr. Plasko, please.
Thank you, if I may. Bill Plasko, from 507 Manhattan Street, town meeting representative. Some of you also know me as chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I'm not here tonight as a member of the Board of Selectmen, as we just unfortunately found out about this afternoon, so the board hasn't had time to review this. I would only state in that respect that the board is concerned about this particular location, how it's developed as immediate abutters, a town property, and also is concerned about the proper economic development and our other residents and how they're treated through the town process. We'll review the record and determine if there's anything for us to do or not to do in this matter. As a private resident comments, I'm very concerned about what's happening or appears to be happening here. And I may not have all my facts right, but as it appears to me, the developer appeared back in 2013 or so when they got this permit originally. And their attorney at the time, Mr. Hilliard, may I also state for the record before I go on that there were some slight references to a letter from Mr. Halkiotis, the town planner and economic development, and also Mr. Ryan, the town engineer. They sent, as I understand it, letters, and I think they should be acknowledged and recognized as having been presented to the board in this matter. And I would hope that the members of the board would give their comments full consideration, as of course their interest as yours is to protect the town.
Now, back to my comments, Mr. Hilliard presented at the time, Attorney Hilliard at the time for the applicant, that they were before the zoning board to get permission for removal of the gravel of this site for the purpose to construct a building. And Mr. Melville and others, I think, have mentioned that, this is one of the reasons permit was granted, because it was going to increase property taxes and so forth to the town. Here we are, 7 years or whatever, 8 years later, and nothing has yet been developed. The comments tonight, they still don't know when it's going to possibly happen. There's no plan presented for the zoning board to be looking at why they need to remove further gravel. It has been referred to that they're mining, that they haven't been able to sell it. I don't believe the permits are for the purpose of making money and selling the property, selling the gravel and so forth. The general purpose, and my belief of the bylaw, is when someone is trying to develop the property and put in a building or put in a development, and the current site and contour of the land and so forth doesn't allow it, and they're going to end up with more soil and fill and gravel, whatever, than they need, that it's reasonable to allow them to remove it, and remove it from the site and possibly from the town, but not just for the purpose of making money when they presented that they were going to be building a building there, as they did to us when they purchased the property. Not that they can be held to that, because once they own the property, they can do anything that's legal. But there's been a lot of comments that, the good developer here, and yet we've heard several comments tonight of violations. You issued a phase 1, and they went on beyond that. They've done things not just in time beyond what the phase 1 was intended to be, that was discussed heavily, but as you just heard from MS Walker, they've gone well beyond what you had permitted them to do. So I don't know how we can sit here and say how responsible they are. So before we give them any further permits, I would hope you'd be very careful about what you allow and how you allow it, and what kind of conditions, if any, you put on it, to make sure we control and protect the town and our other abutters to this property. Yes, I'll leave it at that. I think, there was comments about the vegetation and how steep those slopes are, and that we don't even know how we're going to do that yet. We know it's going to have to be done, but somebody who knows more about the kind of vegetation to be on that steep a slope, maybe that slope is so steep, nothing's going to work, and yet we're letting them go forward. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before any special or final permits are approved, and I hope you get those answers. Thank you.
Just for the record on that too, I appreciate your comments. I certainly do. I believe both Mr. Halkiotis and especially Mr. Ryan's memos were addressed specifically by me in the beginning, asking for them to be done in a prompt manner and not at the 11th hour. And I say that with respect, because certainly Mr. Ryan and Mr. Halkiotis' suggestions, requests, and opinions are certainly welcome, as is everyone's. Okay, but when we don't get them to the last minute, it is difficult to decipher exactly what is meant in them, especially in time for the presentation of the case. Secondly, I do believe Mr. Fabry and possibly Mr. Riley went through the entirety of all 9 points of Mr. Ryan's memo. So I do believe they have been addressed, at least to a certain degree. But regardless, moving on, I do appreciate your commentary without question. So if anybody next up would if there's anybody else reminder on the list.
We have Joe Federico. He was spoken to. Tom Maloney.
Mr. Maloney, any comments or questions, sir?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been here to observe, and I appreciate the time you're all putting in on this stuff, but I'm all set for tonight. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Mary Anderson is still on the line.
Mary, did you have any input on this case?
No question.
Okay, thank you. I have a final issue that I would like to propose. And it is the fact that a final plan isn't all in one. I did hear several issues on this plan means this plan means that. I saw 2 different red lines. I would like to get it all in one and all submitted for final review before a vote is taken. That's my personal opinion. That I would like to see. And if there's nothing further from anybody, I would actually like to ask the board to consider a postponement on any vote in regards to the application, possibly for 2 weeks if we have availability in 2 weeks of reminder. And
Mr.
that's
Chairman,
with the request, just to specify, that's with request, yeah, 1 sec, I'll recognize it. That's just with request to have all the plans finalized and put into a final plan. So I'm not looking at 3 different ones and we don't have the opportunity to make a mistake. If you had something, Mr. Riley, please.
yes, I was going to suggest the possibility of rescheduling this case to December 15. The reason I suggest that, I note that at our next hearing on December 1, there are already 3 cases scheduled that evening. And this is obviously, as it's turned out tonight, a rather lengthy and complicated and obviously very critical case, as Mr. Plasko has pointed out, for the town. And it would seem to me that it's a case that could easily and should have its own night to address the further issues involved, rather than having to follow after 3 other cases that we don't know how long they're going to take. So I would suggest, and make it into the form of a motion if need be, that we continue the case to December 15 at 7:15.
I'll
Yeah,
second
no,
that.
I actually, yeah, I totally concur with that, and thank you. So, I was looking for my sheet, and I am being told that the December 15th is wide open. So, Mr. Bailey, if you're all right with December 15th, I will entertain the motion to continue the hearing until December 15th at 7 o'clock.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's motion on to continue to December 15th, seconded by Mr. Murphy. It's with the request and stipulation of the board that all plans be final and submitted prior to that, if you could, or be ready to go on the 15th for show on the Zoom, please. So, Mr. Mulvihill, how do you vote on that?
Aye, yes.
Mr. Riley,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
I agree.
and Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
All right, so, and I'm an aye as well. So we will continue the hearing on December 15th, 7 p.m. And this is a complicated issue, obviously, and definitely everyone's opinion is appreciated. And I thank you on behalf of the board for all of them. So I will see you on the 15th. I'll see you on the 1st, some of you, and for all of us, I'll see you on the 15th. All right, and good to see everybody as well.
Motion to adjourn, Motion
yeah.
to adjourn, Chair.
Well said. Second that, Mr. Murphy's motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn, Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes,
Mr. Perry,
he's muted.
Mr. Mulvihill, how you?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Hold on, let me
Someone
get,
see if,
yeah.
He went to bed.
he already adjourned. And Mr. Bailey, I assume you and your client are all right with that date, correct? You don't have any conflicts?
It's fine, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
As long as we have a quorum of 4, I guess we could adjourn and tell Jack about it when we get to it.
I think I agree with Mr.
I'm sure he
Farrar.
doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure he doesn't object, so. All right, gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much.
Have a
and,
good
have a
Thanksgiving, everybody, and stay healthy.
Yep, thank you all.
Yes, likewise. Thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, good evening. Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.